that there's a lot of people out there that they hold back in their relationship, you know, and they stay married, or stay, maybe they're not, you know, necessarily legally married, but they stay in their relationship longer than that relationship has really served them.
Yeah.
And
well, that was me.
That was you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that the shame around divorce has a lot to do with this. And, you know, in order for our own lives to really progress and to maximize our benefit to ourselves and our benefit to other people. Thanks for joining us. And if you care to comment, put in the comment section where you're joining us from. We always like to know where people are coming in from. So let us know. If you have any questions that you want to ask us, we'll be happy to answer any questions. It doesn't have to do with divorce or with shame, or, you know, we'll go ahead and take on any questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So welcome. Glad you're here. Yeah. So we were just sharing a little bit about our own stories of divorce and really how society looks at it and how that impacts people, and it can impact their ability to move on from a relationship, or stay in a relationship, or shift a relationship.
You know, it's kind of like the mentality in our society. I like to think of the mentality of losing your virginity. You know, what did you lose, and why do you want to go back and never find it?
Right. I gained so much when I experienced that.
and so we kind of attach ourselves in ways that really aren't good for us.
It's true.
And we do that with our relationships. You know, so often that all parties concerned could be better off and better served if they simply brought their relationship to a peaceful and happy ending.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, you know, for instance, I've often thought that sometimes it'd be wonderful for people to end their relationships on a note that they're going to get together once a year on their anniversary and spend that anniversary time together, and different ways that people can end their relationships so that they can end on a high note.
Yeah. It really is. And I think one of the things that, since I do a lot of teaching with people, and women in particular, around building an ECNM life, is to really look at the structure of marriage and monogamy. And when you really look at that structure, it's no wonder it's so difficult to pull apart from that, because what society teaches us is that we are two that become one. That's the whole thing in marriage, right? Two become one. Well, now if I divorce, I'm actually ripping a part of myself away from this entity. I'm killing off this entity, and I'm only getting a part of me back. And so it's a really big feeling and a really big experience because of the way that default monogamy has been structured. And that's, I think, one of the reasons behind why divorce is so painful and so shameful and so difficult, because of the structure that it creates.
Well, hello, freedom seekers. We're here today talking about divorce shame. You know, and it's something that I had a very real experience with when my wife first came to me and said that she was changing directions in her life and her future did not include me. I just felt so much shame around that I'm going to be a divorced man, that I didn't tell anybody, not my friends that I regularly saw and people that I hung out with. It was about 6 months before I really started even telling anybody. And then it was just a few people then. And so one of the things that we want to help to do is to end that kind of shame and that kind of stigma. And so, Kat, what's your experience with shame and feeling shame with divorce?
Well, my experience was on the opposite end. I was the one that actually initiated the divorce and wanted the divorce. The shame for me was really around being a parent and how to deal with being a parent, a divorced parent, and what that was going to do to my relationship with my daughter, to my relationship with her friends or friends that we had collectively, and then how do we split those up. That was a lot of the shame that I experienced, and then also shame within my family. That marriage was a big deal in my family, and the fact that I had gotten married was big, and now I was the one that was ending that.
You know, I see couples that celebrate being together 25 years, 40 years, 50 years, and things of that nature. And I think to myself now, how sad, because most of those marriages and most of those individual lives are not thriving. They're holding each other back. And there's a few that I've known, but very few where the marriage really brought two people together and made something and continued through the whole life, making something so much better. And in my case, my wife and I started out creating something that was better with the two of us, but then it didn't stay that way very long before things got to where, I mean, it was less than 5 years before we weren't bringing out the best in each other. And, and so, but yet, you know, I was married for 34 years. And so where can we start in thinking about changing this idea of shame and divorce? Because you see, we can't go and point our fingers out to society. We have to look at where it starts with each one of us and the things that we actually communicate. We need to be talking more about the fact that there's no shame in divorce. How do we teach our kids? What about you? You got a daughter that is contemplating getting married. What do you talk to her about, or have you?
Well, one of the things that we talk about is really that in whatever relationship configuration you're choosing is to make it a conscious choice. And that so many of what we see today in the pain and the shame comes from the fact that we went into marriage as a default. And that it wasn't something that many of us consciously chose, or consciously chose that person in a really strong, intentional way. And so when we are going to go into a relationship, whatever configuration it is to really go into it with a intentional, conscious decision that this is the person and these are the things we're going to talk about and how we're going to shape our relationship, not just today, but over time. Because we know over time, we grow as human beings. We shift and we change from our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, our 50s. And if we want a relationship to move through those different changes and shifts, we have to be able to communicate that with our partners.
And I think it's important for us to also communicate start communicating differently, that life or the marriage is not forever. And we get that concept that it's to be forever. Well, where does that come from and why? You know, it's like we don't today live with beliefs and thoughts from 100 or 200 or 500 years ago. You know, we'd be living a totally different life. And so ask yourself where these ideas come from. And by asking ourselves that, then we can realize that, yes, it's time for a change. And the change starts with us. And that there's no reason for shame to be a part of divorce. And then how we communicate that to our family and our friends and even each other. Because you and I talk about all the time that if our relationship is not serving and bringing out the absolute best in us, then it's time for us to move on and get a divorce and move on along our way. And so, you know, I just think that that's a much healthier outlook. And I see that we've got a couple of people that joined us now. And so if you have a question, hello, Abba. If you have any questions for us, then we'll go ahead and address a couple of questions. We will be editing.
And I would say marriage as we have known it, that there are ways that we can create marriage. And again, we expanding the definition of marriage so that we can include maybe multiple people. And marriage doesn't have to be a legal aspect.
Yeah, we're not legally
married, but we consider that we're married. We feel that we're married. This is the relationship that we're creating. And so it really takes a shift in how we look at marriage and how we define marriage. And I would agree with you that marriage, from the way that it has been up until this point, it's outdated. And we need to shift it and change it, and that's one of the things that we do when we're putting out. But
we don't want to be afraid of these relationships, though. We want to be able to have a marriage type relationship with people,
right?
But we need to talk about what that means, because and then introduce the ideas that it does not mean that we're going to be stuck with each other for the rest of our lives,
right?
Till death do us apart. You know, it just means that as long as we continue to bring out the absolute best in each other, and the relationship serves us both, not just me, not just you, but it serves us both, then we can go on and continue in our relationship. And of course, us being ethically and consensually non-monogamous means that we also have the wonderful experience of having other people in our life as well.
Absolutely.
In fact, we would like to have a non-legal marriage with several other people as being part of our family and household, that we create these lives together. But even in forming that, though, we also want to have those individuals know that they're not like obligating themselves for the rest of their lives. And if ever that their life would be better off not in that relationship, that we want them to be free to be the best person that they can be.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of what we teach and a lot of what we do. So I have another question. What do you think about the concept of no marriage and no cohabitation? Again, I think it's how we define things and how we structure things. We cohabitate on probably about a 70% basis, 70 to 80% basis. And that works for us.
There's no right or wrong way when it comes to relationships. So we certainly in our society come from a position of thinking that there is a right and a wrong way, but there isn't. And it's really to be defined what works best for each individual. And for that period of time, for instance, you may go for 5 years and feel like that your life thrives outside of having a committed relationship, and you don't cohabit with anybody. But then suddenly, in fact, when we met, neither one of us were ever expecting to be in the kind of relationship that we are.
No, not at all.
But, we just knew that connection was the connection that it was like magic. Yeah. And so it was like a week after I kissed this woman, I told her that I was going to marry her. And I said, "You're going to be my wife." And she says, "I know." And I mean, it was just something that it was kind of weird to try to explain.
It is kind of weird to explain. That was 6.5 years ago. And so, there is something to consciously creating and intentionally creating your relationships, whether it's with one person or multiple people. And that's what we continue to do every day. We choose this relationship every day.
So question to throw at you, because we hear a lot of people talk about, I'm looking for my soulmate, I'm looking for my twin flame and all this. And see, in our relationship structure, ethical and consensual non-monogamy, I do believe that there are soulmates for us, but I don't believe there's one soulmate. No. And so how do you feel that plays into our personal life and also into just people's relationships in general?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I do believe that there are multiple soulmates, that people connect on a soul level with many different people. It could be romantic, it could be sexual, it could be platonic, it can be family related on many, many levels. And with us in particular, I actually feel we are very much soulmates. We've had multiple lives together. We continue to come back together because we have a resonating energy. And I also think that in default monogamy, which is what society teaches us, that it falsely gives this idea that there's only one and that you can have only one soulmate. And I've even seen people who have had relationships and either the person died or they ended up in a divorce, and that person is like, I'll never love again because they were my soulmate. And that hurts. And it's like, no, there's many soulmates out there. There's many people out there who can fulfill what you need. It's not just one.
Now, what do you mean by there is an invite the state into your bedroom type of way? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you can help us to know what that means, then we can chat about that a little bit. But one of the things that certainly it's just, again, because we did not really have a strong belief about past lives before we met. But then once we met, and the first time that we ever made love and had sex, at that time, you had this beautiful vision and dream, and you knew details, specific details that did not relate to anything in your past reading or studying or learning or anything, but you had specific names and you had details that led you on a search. And when you went on your search, you found that we had a past life together,
a significant past life,
together, and I died, and when I died, then you wore black the rest of your life. There's books written about us, and so you wore black the rest of your life, and because you had felt this idea of you lost your soulmate. And so I'd say again that there's always belief structures that we have. And a belief structure is not a bad thing. It's a belief structure, and that's where I don't want to put anybody else's belief structure. If somebody believes in monogamy, if somebody believes that divorce is wrong, I don't want to put that down. I just don't want someone else to take their belief structure and impose it on other people and then make people feel shame if they don't have the same belief structure that I have. The life that I had before non-monogamy, before I turned 45 and in my 30s and 20s, I was real good about that, being able to take, as a very religious person, that was part of my talent, was to make sure that people understood that they were either living right or they were living wrong.
A lot of judgment.
And
there's a lot of judgment in the world overall. And that's one of the things around living an ECNM life, is we really try to move away from that concept of judgment. You be you, we be me, and we live our lives however we're going to live them. And we accept what other people want and choose. Just, we want you to make it a choice, not a default, not what someone else or society has
and it should be a choice
imposed.
that allows your life to soar. And so that you have this energy about you that is a creative part of the creative process of the life that you then create for yourself, that energy allows you to do great things in your life and to feel that your life matters, because I think every life matters. Right now there's a big deal about Black Lives Matter. I think every life matters. And I don't want to put down this whole situation that's going on now at all. I don't want to say anything that's going to be misconstrued about that. But the fact is that, yes, we all need to know that we matter, and we all need to know that and to have lives that truly we are creating, that we're creating in a way that they matter.
Absolutely. So love is a chemical cocktail that promotes human continuity. I would say to a degree, there's certainly chemicals that run through our body that create a feeling of what we call love or connection. So all marriage does is invite the state into your bedroom because it's the absence of trust, not the presence of it. Interesting. And again, it depends on how you structure and how you view marriage and how you choose to define it. And so, yes, if you are going down the legal route of marriage, you are accepting the legal ramifications of what the government and states and things have put into play for marriage.
And going back to that chemical cocktail of love, You know, I think that that is really a wonderful thing to experience and enjoy in life. And one of the things that we talk about is how it can be, it's really a wonderful thing. I mean, since we've been together, you've been in love, that chemical cocktail that gets created is something that is a wonderful thing for us to be able to experience and have. And I encourage people to enjoy that experience as often as they can, but don't put all the attachment to it. Like, you know, like, oh my God, this is the one and this is the person, you know? And I mean, one of my girlfriends about a year ago, you know, that she's really was into being non-monogamous, but then suddenly she fell in love with this guy, and suddenly now she's monogamous because he's monogamous, but she was like really committed to living a non-monogamous life. And you know, and so that's the thing, is that we get these chemicals running through us, and we misconstrue them, we misunderstand them. The chemical cocktail of love is there for us to enjoy. I guess kind of like we enjoy going out and having a beer or a cocktail once in a while, you know. And there's certain things that we, you know, sometimes we get to having just a little light feeling, and it's good.
It is.
And
I need a drink of water.
And so
excuse me.
And so all these things in life are part of life for us to enjoy and for us to not shy away from. But the problem comes when we place meaning and identification on these things, which just really do not help our lives, and they kind of start to drag our lives down. And that's the thing that I notice with a lot of people, and we should probably be talking at some point, be doing some videos about love, because that whole idea of love, I mean, love is a wonderful thing. I personally, it's like, when I left my religion of Christianity, my new religion became to love. And that's love at all levels, and to allow the love in me to flow out of me and give myself in loving ways to people. Our mentor, somebody that we met just here last like very end of November, 1st of December, something like that. The gentleman has become our mentor. You know, it's a gentleman that we've only chatted with online because he's an Australian, and we were going to meet in March, and then we had this whole pandemic and we couldn't meet. And so, you know, in person. And so we have weekly communications, but he is somebody that I could just tell right away that, without him saying anything, that he just has got so much love that flows from him. He does. And now, unfortunately, right now he's practicing monogamy. But again, I'm not going to put him down for his belief, because he knows that we're non-monogamous, and he doesn't put us down for our belief. And so we support each other in that. But the thing is, people need to be able to have their own beliefs and then live with what they believe. And as long as that works for you, then go with it. And when it doesn't work for you, when it doesn't serve you any longer, then sit back a little bit and take a look at it and say, well, what's wrong with this here?
Right. And what can I do differently? Where can I make a shift? And that's one of the big things around marriage is, there are so many times people will come together, and I had this in my own marriage, was we recognized things were not working. We were not compatible. We were not doing well. And we did try to fix it, and that's okay. It's okay to try to fix it. But when you realize, okay, this isn't getting fixed, and we're not any better off than we were 6 months ago or a year ago or whatever it is, then maybe it's time to sit down and look at a different strategy. And that strategy might include divorce, and be able to accept
whether it be
that
a legal divorce, or
right.
be like
an emotional divorce.
We're not legally married, but it would still be like divorce if we were deciding to go our separate ways.
It would. And so be able to have those conversations, and what does that look like, and how do we separate? How do we transition this relationship? How do we move on from this relationship? And of course, the deeper connected you become financially, with property, with children, with families, all of that intertwining, it takes longer, and it's more to unravel. And that's where a lot of that shame and guilt and judgment comes in, because of all this intertwining that we've done. And that's like I said in the beginning, we have this concept that the two shall become one. And that is where, when divorce happens, you feel like you've ripped yourself apart because you have attached yourself so much to this other person that they have become your identity, and now you're ending that.
And it's not just the attachment to this other person. You know, I mean, there's a lot of other things involved. There is like, what is everybody going to think? And that's the shame of divorce. You know, what is everybody going to think? And then there's the whole thing as well about finances, you know, and I know that was a big deal for me, that my wife had not gone off to work in a job for over 20 years. And so, you know, I built a business. She was my partner. She worked with me in the business, but mostly I always prided myself to be a good provider, and I just wanted her to have a good life. And so she did. She had a really good life. She didn't do any work that she didn't want to do. She worked probably an average of 20 hours a week, and the rest of the time she did what she wanted to do. And we didn't have kids, and so she didn't have to go off to take care of kids every day or anything. And so she had a good life. Yeah. And so, you know, with that though, that in fact, it was all about the finances, because when the last Great Recession came around, and the state of Washington, where I lived in Washington, had my business in Washington, and they changed some laws, and then I could no longer continue in business. And so when that happened, then during the recession, I went broke. And my wife says, well, you know, now that I have to go out and get a job, then maybe this is a good time for me to say goodbye. And so that was great, you know, I mean, because that actually helped me to move on with my life in a new way. But the thing is that there was all these financial elements for so long that, you know, I would think, well, gee, if we ever got a divorce, you know, because we had more than one business, what would happen with this and this, you know, and the home, and where would we live, and how would we survive? And so I learned from that. And so when we got together, and you had, at first we got together when we were in Seattle, and you had an apartment and I had my house. My girlfriend lived with me in my house, and you lived in your apartment, and I'd spend half my time with you in your apartment and half my time at my house with my girlfriend. But then we moved here to Ventura, California. And when we moved here to Ventura, California, one of the things that we talked a lot about then was how we're going to work our finances and what have you. And I emphasize that you maintain your independence. You know, and I think that that's one of the important factors that people can do in their relationships when they first start to form those relationships is don't ever get into a place where you lose your ability to be independent and you in turn become dependent on each other. It's not a bad thing to have some dependence on each other. Well,
that's the interdependence. That's the healthy level of connection.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Abba asked her, so she had a good life, and did I? You know, and I think that when we live our lives, that we make our lives good, and I you know, my life was my business. And my business, I worked 80 hours a week, and I made a lot of money, and my business thrived. And so, you know, it was exciting for me to be able to go out there and actually go out in the beginning of the day with no money in my pocket and come back at the end of the day with over $5,000 in my pocket. And so those days were exciting days. And to be able to do that, you know, anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, do that day after day after day. And I mean, that's good money, and it's exciting to do that. And so my business was good, but it wasn't something I could sustain. I mean, I did that for 15 years, but that's working 80 to 100 hours a week. Yeah. And I couldn't sustain that. And so my wife had a good life, but, you know, as far as me having a good life, you know, I would say no. It wasn't the life that I would desire to have, like what I'm creating now. Yeah. But you know, it was what I learned from. And so that's how life works, is that we go through our lives and we learn by the processes, and we say, well, no, I don't really want to do something like that again. Right. You know, I'd rather get along as I do today with making less money. Now there will come a point down the road we'll make more money, but I'd rather make less money than to have to go through and have that kind of a life.
Yeah.
Stuff didn't make me happy. No. In fact, I spent the last 3 years, we moved here to Ventura 3.5 years ago. And for the first 3 years of that, I spent 70% of my time going back to Seattle, just getting rid of my stuff and dealing with stuff that I had, you know, accumulated for 50 some years in Seattle. And so, you know, the stuff, and so now we are very happy to live a minimalist life and not really have a lot of stuff. The stuff that we do have, we want to be having things that we are using that serve our life. If it's something that's going to sit on a shelf for 6 months or a year, then it's like, we got to ask ourselves, why do we have that?
Yeah, absolutely. Stuff doesn't make you happy. You make you happy. And that's actually what we teach. We teach that in our coaching program, is we teach you how to make yourself happy, how to bring that happiness out.
Create a life where, regardless of your situations that you find yourself in today, you can still create a life that you absolutely love today. And so it's not the stuff, it's it's the work that we do to change the inside of us, so that we are, I like to have that loving energy to come out of me, you know, and I really work on making sure that I'm a human being, because I used to be better at talking about being loving than actually being loving. And unfortunately today, now I get to actually not only be a loving human being, but I get to be a sexual human being, and that's another expression of love. And I really enjoy that.
Did you have to pay alimony, or were you absolved of that responsibility?
I was absolved of that responsibility. It was just kind of an interesting situation, because my wife, it was about 5 months after we got our divorce finalized, she died. And so she was in a nursing home throughout most of the process of our divorce. She waited a year and 2 months before she filed for divorce, after she left, basically said that she was going to divorce me. She waited a year and 2 months before she filed for divorce. And it was a year later, actually the year to the month later, after she told me she was going to divorce me, it was a year to that month later that she then found out that she had cancer. And she then didn't really last very long with that. And it was kind of sad, you know, because I would never had wanted her to experience anything like that. It was not a surprise, because she didn't have a healthy eating. She looked good, you know, and people look at her and like, yeah, I'd like to have some of that, you know. And so she looked good, but it's really what we put inside our mouth, you know. And if you're not just putting all the right things in there, eventually it's going to catch up with her, with you. And I knew from when we were in our 20s and got married that she wasn't like something we talked about. She wasn't putting the right things in her mouth, and that created some problems, and it finally caught up with her. So she got cancer, but anyway, let's see.
Well, the funny thing is my ex also passed away. So that was also very interesting. We were about 4 years out of our divorce, and he passed away very suddenly. It wasn't cancer. It was basically heart failure. So yeah, in some respects, You know, we look at our energy, we look at our lives, and we believe that what we feel and what we think on the inside really impacts not just what's outside of us, but it impacts our body, it impacts our wealth, it impacts our relationships, it impacts everything.
And that's what we've learned with our coaching program. We help people to create a magnetic energy so that they are pushing away from them the things that don't serve their life, and they're drawing themselves to the things that serve their life, that's good in their life. And people don't understand, and they don't, most people I don't think really know that we all have this magnetic energy. We don't know how to tap into it.
Exactly.
And so in our coaching program, we really help people to tap into that.
Yeah. So my situation, very quickly, when I got divorced, I do have a child. And because of certain situations, he was going to end up with majority of custody. And so between custody payments on my end and alimony payments on his end, we just scrapped it all and said we don't owe each other anything. And it was probably the best thing that we ever did.
Why don't we just say what those situations were?
Yeah.
Basically, Kat was in her...
I was starting my ECNM relationships as I was in the process of divorce. I'd already separated from my husband, but we were not legally divorced yet. And he found out, and he used that as a blackmail tactic.
Her career was in early childhood education. And so she had spent, you know, many years,
25 years
building a career. And he basically blackmailed her and said that because she'd started living an ethically and consensually non-monogamous life, and so he basically then said, hey, you know, I'll ruin you. I'll ruin your career. I will make sure that you can't get a job in your field because they'll be afraid that you're a pervert if you don't give me full custody of the daughter. And so it was kind of like, you know, what do you do? What does she do? And so fortunately, you know, the fact that who has legal custody does, but she was 12 at the time when you left. 13. So who has legal custody does not necessarily mean what is going to actually take place. You know, it's like we're not legally married, you know? And so for her, there was a rebuilding process because there weren't good things said about mom, but there was a rebuilding process between she and her daughter, and the ex-husband actually supported that rebuilding process.
He did, actually. Yeah. I've come to learn that he actually was very supportive and said, you know, she's your mother, you need to figure this out. And so we have, and I have an amazing relationship with my daughter now.
She's 20 years old now, and it's just really is an amazing relationship.
It's just wonderful. So, you know, we just never know. We never know what's going to be coming into our lives. And so we need to create what we want. Otherwise, we just get what we get. And I'm not willing to get what I get anymore. I'm here to create what I want.
And when we met, now we had met, you were about 6 months out of your divorce, and you were in a relationship at that time with a man and a woman, and the three of you all kind of lived together. And so then
I had my own space.
She had her own space, but but the, you know, it's kind of like spend time at her space and then spend some time with the couple as well. But so then when we met, you know, you were in a place where you weren't really thinking it was going to all work out well. And the thing that I emphasize to you is that the actions that you were taking, because you took the actions you weren't reacting, you were taking actions for a very solid and good reasons. And in actuality, I said, if you do this right, you will be showing your daughter healthy ways to have a relationship, so that when she gets into relationships, she knows better about how to have healthy relationships than what you were in.
Exactly.
And that is exactly how things have turned out.
It has. Yeah. And now she's in a wonderful relationship, and it's a conscious relationship that she and her partner are creating. And she does not. She is very open to it, and she's very accepting of it. But I think being young, she still is not quite sure what she wants.
Her first boyfriend, they opened their relationship and they dabbled in non-monogamy a little bit.
Yeah.
But then they ended that relationship, and so then she got into the relationship that she's in now. And I think that, like oftentimes happens when you get all those chemicals going through your body and all, it's like, oh my God, I can't imagine ever seeing my partner with someone else.
Right.
You know, I've got to have that person all to myself. And there's all this clinginess that goes on. And, you know, it's pretty hard to avoid that with the culture and society that we're in. Right. And that's why we try to do a lot more of speaking out. Yeah. You know, we want to, when we get some income coming in, we're working on creating our income online. And as we do that, then we're going to be hitting the road, going on speaking tours. You know, where we'll have small town hall type events in towns and what have you, coffee shop events, as well as hitting up the media, the radio, the TV, and various media sources as well. And so that we can go out there and help people to understand that there are different other ways of living besides what we see around us in society. Because it is, I mean, the world is changing. Absolutely. And it's changing at this point very rapidly. And we have a window here available to us where I started last year, at the end of last year, saying this is going to be the decade of the roaring 20s.
Boy, it came in with a roar, didn't it?
and I believe that we are going to, by the end of this decade, we are going to see ethical and consensual non-monogamy be more widely accepted. Yeah. And we know that there are 12 to 15 million of us living mostly in the closet in the United States alone.
That's right.
Now you think about how many states are there in the
50 states.
50 states. And so let's see. That means there's at least 10 or 15, maybe even 25 non-monogamous people probably in every state. At least. You know? And yet, you know, people, we feel so isolated because we're in the closet. Yeah. And we need to, and I understand why people are in the closet. I mean, they're afraid of their jobs. They're afraid of, like, you know, me. Like Kat, you know, and all kinds of things that go on. You know, what if people find out? And that's why, you know, I say that we are today where the LGBT community was 30 years ago. Absolutely. And, you know, we now know how things have progressed and gotten better. They're not perfect, you know, but there certainly were a lot more people who are of LGBT community person, you know, whether you're lesbian or gay or bi or transsexual or whatever. There's certainly a whole lot more openness for people.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what we'll get there. We want to create for people who are ethically and consensually non-monogamous.
All right, we'll take this as our final question and then we're going to wrap up. So considering your lifestyle, what are your opinions of love dolls as substitutes for coital relations? You know, do you? If you like love dolls, go for it.
It's great.
Mean, why not? Have fun.
You know, I mean, there certainly is not going to be the sum of the complications that people have in trying to make a relationship work. I mean,
you know, they don't talk back. You know, they don't leave the toilet seat up. You know,
the only thing is, then that means that you're not going to get your love doll to do any cleaning and housekeeping and so forth. You know, you got to do everything on your own.
You've got to make them stroke your face. You know,
my love doll goes to the market and brings home, you know, food, and then I get fed, and that's pretty nice. But you know, sometimes that people weigh out the fact that, I just don't want to have all that baggage, that complication. I just want to just kind of enjoy the life. The moment. And part of that too is, I think we do talk about how important it is to be in love with yourself first.
Absolutely.
And I think that someone who has a relationship with like a love doll has got to also then realize and understand the relationship they have with themselves.
Absolutely. That's our primary relationship. This is right here. This is your primary relationship. You love you. You fill you up. You be the best version of yourself. When you are the best version of yourself, then that's what you get to share with other people. It's not digging out the well to give someone the bottom of the well. You got to fill the well up yourself, and then you give them the overflow. because you've got so much love for yourself, so much passion, so much enjoyment, so much ease, so much just life in you. Then you get to share that with someone else. And if you want to share that with a loved one, you go right ahead. Awesome.
Yeah.
There you go. See, you've got it.
That is right.
You got it. Cleaning can be done by a maid, and food can be delivered by a restaurant.
And my
go for it.
My late first wife, she would tell me that she felt really bad when we first got married. She felt really bad because she was an athlete. And so she didn't, when her mom would try to show her some cooking tricks and so forth, and she was really not interested. She was interested in being an athlete. And so, she never learned really much about cooking. And yet there was this stereotype that she had that a woman is supposed to cook for her man.
Right.
And we had the first 5 years of our marriage, we had a lot of conversation because she put herself down constantly because she wasn't feeling like she was fulfilling her role as a wife because she wasn't a good cook. And I had been a cook in a nightclub. Not just somebody who can throw a couple burgers on the grill. I was a master cook, and so like I could cook, but so I kept, saying to her, I did not marry you for you to become my maid, or my housekeeper, or my cook. And I said we could hire people to do things when we go out and just focus on ourselves and our own lives and making some money. Then we can hire those simple things. Yeah. And I know that's something that we've discussed for the life that we're creating. Absolutely. Is that we want to have somebody that is part of our family that we're having sex with and a relationship with, but that is our domestic person, somebody who just loves the domestic chores and then wants to, then that'd be their way of contributing to our lives and to the family's life, is by doing the domestic chores.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been really fun.
Appreciate all your comments and keeping us engaged. It's been really wonderful. We hope you'll join us again.
And have a very great night.
All right. Take care.
Bye.